Alrighty. So, First Nations state that Alberta independence ain't going to happen. So, since Mark Carney got elected, there's now been growing tensions. We know that this is kind of already set before Mark Carney, after many years of neglect by Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party in Ottawa, that there's been tensions between them and Alberta. But now it's become more mainstream that Alberta might be looking for separation. And First Nations communities of Alberta is declaring that's not going to happen. So the First Nations communities of Alberta wrote this letter to Danielle Smith, saying, "You are attempting to manufacture a national unity crisis by enabling a referendum on separation and a financial sell of individuals at the exact moment when Canadians need to unite against Donald Trump's America. The province of Alberta is on treaty lands. Please be advised that your irresponsible statements and actions are in breach of treaties number 6, 7, and 8. We demand that you immediately stand down from this conduct." So Danielle Smith hasn't come officially forward with separation, but she's talked about it in other instances. She's, speculated the idea, and currently she has a committee coming out to discuss further action on the possibility of separation, because we know that Alberta, much like Saskatchewan and a bit of BC, they're feeling the burden of the neglect by mostly mainstream politicians in Ottawa. So there's, again, some of it there. I don't want to read it again because we already did. But here's the Edmonton Journal saying Indigenous chiefs accuse Alberta Premier Smith of stoking separation talk. Two First Nations chiefs are accusing Alberta Premier Danielle Smith of attempting to manufacture a national unity crisis and are calling on her to stop stoking the fires of separation. This government has proposed legislation that would make it easier for citizens to call for a referendum on seceding from Canada. Chief Sheldon Sunshine of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation and Mikisew Cree Nation Chief Billy Joe Takuro say in a letter that the Premier is enabling a referendum on separation and a fanatical sell of individuals. So not financial. Sorry, the print was a little small. So fanatical sell of individuals when Canadians need to unite against U.S. tariffs. Smith has said it would be up to Albertans, not their government, to put the separation question on the ballot, and that she supports Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada. But the chiefs say even if Smith passes the buck onto citizens, the province can't breach treaties. In a second letter, they asked Prime Minister Mark Carney to get the province of Alberta in line. On Thursday, how do you say that? Piaki? Nation Chief Troy Knowlson issued a statement that said while it's understandable that many people in the West are frustrated that their rejection of the Liberal Party was not mirrored in other parts of Canada, talk of separation cannot be undertaken without the consent of Alberta's First Nations. We are here. We are aggressively protective our historic treaty rights and our inherent rights. We will require that the Crown's obligations to First Nations be honored and fulfilled, Knowlton said. Smith responded in an unrelated news conference saying the proposed legislation does not breach treaty rights. Any Albertan can put up an idea forward on any topic, and if they are able to get the number of signatures, then it would go up to a vote, and that includes a vote of members of First Nations. And we encourage Indigenous peoples to participate in the process, she said. The Albertan NDP has called the Premier's move dangerous and cowardly. If you're going to flirt with separation, call a referendum, said Naheed Nasheen. Just do it, and let's see what Albertans have to say. And by the way, Premier, when you lose that referendum, please leave public life forever. So, this is a difficult time. This is between like a rock and a hard place because understandably that Ottawa politicians, the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, uh, have put Alberta in this difficult situation. They have undermined their critical energy infrastructure. They've undermined them through heinous taxation and woke ideology that just goes against the grain of Alberta and what Alberta stands for. At the same time, though, I feel like the separation talk or what Daniel Smith is proposing is, oh, let's get this to a vote and we get enough signatures, we're out of here, is this kind of quick fix that's not going to result in a good outcome. That if Alberta does separate and Saskatchewan comes in with also separating with Alberta and maybe BC, that it's going to be a major devastation, not only for Canada to lose critical provinces that help flourish their GDP, but also devastating for Alberta itself because it needs the other provinces. That's why we have unity. That's why we have this confederation known as Canada. And we have the provinces uniting together based on their exports, based on their resources, and we can come together as a nation to do that. But it just seems like we're just back and forth of this trivial triade between each other. So here's this guy, Bill Sukup. They can also succeed their treaty lands from Alberta. Not saying right or wrong, but just pointing out that is exactly what they told Quebec they would do in the 1995 referendum. So yes, Quebec tried to do this. Quebec has been trying to separate from Canada for many years, mostly with the Francophone community. They want French separation away from English. A long story. I'm not even going to get into detail with that. But they tried to do this in 1995, and guess what? It failed. It failed by a teeny tiny margin of people. I think it was like 60,000 or 65,000 votes that included that they weren't going to succeed out of Canada. And then the Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, came out and said, Canada without Quebec is Quebec without Canada. We need each other in unity. That's kind of my impression. I gotta do the another thing. Canada without Quebec. I haven't gotten that far yet. But it's exactly the point. Like, if we lose Quebec, that's gonna be a big loss for Canada. But I don't think Quebec understands that if it goes out of Canada, that's going to be a big loss for them. Same with Alberta. Same with Saskatchewan. That's why we have this federation. That's why Canada formed this union of all these different provinces. And why we need to collaborate. We need to discuss. Can't put each other down in these ridiculous ways. We can't put these heinous policies on Alberta and expecting Alberta to get along with it. We got to come together. We got to have these talks. It's negotiation between the provinces, negotiation from the provinces to the federal government. That's what it takes to survive this country. And if we can't have that, then what is the point of Canada? What is the point of this country? If we just keep pushing nations or pushing provinces out of the nation. What's the point of the Confederation? What's the point of our men and women overseas fighting to protect this nation? What would be the point of that? So I feel like this is faults on both ends for this. So Rebel News says Premier Smith makes her stance on Alberta separation crystal clear. My personal position is that we need Alberta sovereignty within a united Canada. That's a bit conflicting. You need Alberta sovereignty within a united Canada. So I'm assuming what that means is they want Alberta to get their voice heard among the other provinces if we're going to unite Canada, which I agree with. Alberta plays a factor to this country as much as Ontario, as much as Atlantic Canada, as much as the Yukon and territories. There's a reason all these provinces are part of this country, and we need to respect, we need to honor, We need to come together. We need to come to common consensus among these provinces and do what we can to serve the needs of the people. So here's what Daniel Smith said.
Do you support the efforts to hold a referendum on Alberta separating from Canada?
I support the process of citizens being able to choose an issue that they care about and then being able to get enough signatures to put it to the people. And I guess we'll have to wait and see what comes forward on that.
And what is your personal position on Alberta separating from
My
Canada?
personal position is I believe in Alberta sovereignty within a united Canada.
What does that mean?
It means like what we're doing today. When the federal government violates the Constitution, goes out of their way to interfere with our exclusive jurisdiction, we are going to meet them with every step that we can in order to preserve our ability to manage our own affairs. And in today's announcement, particularly for electricity, we are simply not going to allow the federal government, based on ideology, to violate the Constitution and put our people at risk of being in blackout during the dead of winter or the heat of summer. We're just not going to do it. So these are the kind of things that you can expect to see from our government, and we'll do more of them if we have to.
So I apologize for people that couldn't hear that. I know it's a bit low. But basically what she's saying is, it comes down to Alberta. It comes down to the people of Alberta to decide their fate. And she makes the argument that, the federal government has pushed us around. They violated constitutions. They violated ethics to weasel them around, putting Alberta down, putting Alberta energy down, to push policies like net zero, to push policies like emissions caps and carbon taxes and all this stuff. That's crumbling that province. That's devastating a huge factor of what that province needs to survive. And that is why Alberta should not be getting this burden, considering the fact that the energy sector is a huge part of this nation. We have a GDP that's collapsing within itself. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we put all this harshness on our energy infrastructure and our energy industry. That is a big component of the GDP. It plays huge value to this nation. So we'd be stupid as Canadians as a whole, to push Alberta further and further away from us to the point that they're just going to vote for a separation. And again, as I stated, it's going to be a big loss for us, but it's also going to be a big loss for Alberta. I feel like Alberta, yes, it could, fix your energy industry to get away from the federal government of Canada and its heinous policies, but it needs other provinces, it needs other industries in order to survive as its own country. So it's a big conundrum. It's a rock and a hard place. And as she's saying that it putting the pressure more on Albertans to decide their fate. But I feel like Albertans, they don't want to leave Canada. At the same time, though, they know that how harsh the federal government has been to their people and to the province as a whole. So really just comes down to the federal government needs to respect Alberta, really needs to understand that Alberta plays a huge factor, more than they believe. And Alberta needs to have that argument, have that stance, and saying that, hey, we're not going to consider separation if you're willing to meet these demands. That's just my take of that. And here is, this is Blanchette, Yves Blanchette of the Bloc Québécois, who understandably is who's against Alberta. He's against Alberta. So I understand Albertans are frustrated with these kind of left-wing parties. That it's not just the Liberals. It would also be the NDP. It's also the Green Party. It's also the Bloc Québécois. And as Yukon Strawn points out, in the last 48 hours, Carney has hinted at a new fairness tax for homeowners. And Quebec has, again, shunned Alberta energy while expecting to keep the lion's share of the profits from Alberta oil. So, Yves Blanchette of Bloc Québécois keeps shunning Alberta. Keeps shunning Alberta, saying we don't need this oil and gas. Well, listen to what he says here.
And we will have to remain the barrier not to be crossed, protecting French language and secularity of the state in Quebec, and a different model in immigration which has to be successful, and the fact that there's no future for oil and gas, at least in Quebec and probably everywhere. And this has to be said and protected.
So he's saying it has to be said that there's no future for oil and gas. That we as francophone, we as Francois, Quebecois, the Black Quebecois, say that there's no future for oil and gas. So it's people like him, in their utter ignorance, to not understand that the oil and gas, the natural gas industry coming out of Alberta is what's keeping this country afloat and provides a huge section of our GDP. And we'd be stupid as a country to let Alberta force itself out because of being in a difficult position where they have to choose their fate if they want to continue being tirade by the federal government, by the rest of these political parties that don't understand, and to a premier and other people that are trying to go around individuals to bypass to further advance the secession away from Canada. So it is a difficult position. It's a difficult position. And that's why I wrote, well, here's Calgary Herald. Danielle Smith furious with Doug Ford, Team Canada, to set up to me. So premiers like Doug Ford here in Ontario have also bashed Danielle Smith, saying that, oh, you got to get into line. You got to get into line. You got to be with the rest of the crowd. You got to understand that oil and gas is dead. And we're going to side with the big crowd. We're going to side with the big boys. You're not contributing to Canada. Whereas Danielle Smith is just trying to defend the largest business sector in her province and the largest business sector within the country, within the West. So who's more at fault of this? Who's more at fault of this? Is it Danielle Smith for standing her grounds to defend that industry that affects a lot of people and affects a lot of people that aren't getting their electricity? As she said, that these horrible policies have led to blackouts in a lot of Alberta during the winter. She's standing up for that, but yet all the other premiers are turning away to side with the big boys in the federal government. So who's more at fault to this? This is what I wanted to do. So I wrote a Substack on this. You can go check it out, kitzcorner.substack.com, to read some of these articles. I did this write-up here where it says, Canada would be stupid to lose Alberta and the West. Despite the constant strains between Ottawa and the prairies, Canada as a whole would be in turmoil if Alberta leaves the Federation. So, understandably, that I get why Alberta's frustrated. I get that Saskatchewan is frustrated. I understand all this. But at the same time, knowing that separation is not going to resolve these issues. That, yeah, oh, you're free away from Ottawa and the tyrannical federal government. At the same time, though, Alberta can't just only survive on oil and natural gas. That there needs to be other industries, and other provinces need to be incorporated into that. Hence, why all these provinces serve a purpose to this nation of Canada. It'd be like if Ontario decided to separate and form its own country or be part of the United States. You might say, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Get Ontario out of here. But then you lose a big portion of Canada. you lose a lot of the businesses. You lose a lot of manufacturing. If it's BC, you lose the fisheries. If it's Atlantic provinces, you lose all the ports and shipping that comes through there. If it's, further north, you lose one of the territories. There goes all your mining and minerals. So every single province and territory of Canada is vital importance to this. And that's why every province and territory within Canada deserves the respect it does. And the fact that over a decade now, the federal government has been putting Alberta down and down and down again over these heinous policies, these ridiculous policies that don't lead to anything, is just stupid. Absolutely stupid. And you're just pushing away a province that's necessary to keep the country afloat because of its energy sector, because of its resources. If you're going to push that away, that's it of Canada. Like, you can't make heads or tails about that. You have to, it's a black pill moment. When you lose Alberta, Canada's done. You don't have an energy sector, you don't have a country. Considering the fact that the energy sector plays a huge portion of the GDP and the economy as a whole of this country.